Okay, good morning, everybody. The sound is okay? Yes, good. All right, fine. So today we're going to talk about the concept of Deveikut. Deveikut is a very, very central concept in Kabbalistic thought, and it is one of the prime goals of Kabbalistic meditation, as well as Kavanot. What are the Kavanot? The Kavanot are the intentions, the deliberate, conscious intentions that one has during the performance of various activities, especially mitzvot, the commandments, and during prayer, called the kavanot. And the end goal of the kavanot and meditation in general is Deveikut. Now, what does Deveikut mean? Deveikut essentially means from the word Yidabek, to cleave together or to stick things together. In other words, to make them into one thing. There's a difference between hitkashrut and hitdabkut. Hitkashrut means to bind two things together, but even though two things are bound together, in general, they remain two separate things which are just bound together, which is not the case with Deveikut. Deveikut is the idea of two things that are stuck together, that are glued together. The word for glue in Hebrew is devek, of which Deveikut is a derivative. So when things are stuck together, they really become one thing. So in other words, the basic idea of Deveikut is that the soul cleaves to its source up above. However, there are a number of different types of Deveikut, a number of different levels of Deveikut that are spoken about in Kabbalah. And this is one of the things that I want to talk about today. Now, there are a number of different verses that talk about the concept of Deveikut. There's many verses, in fact, Vod Tidbekun, cleave to him, Vatim HaDeveikim, B'Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kulchem Hayom, you cleave to God today, and therefore you are alive today, all of you are alive. And so on and so on, Votid Bak, cleave to him. And there are all kinds of verses that express different aspects of the concept of Deveikut. But in general, Deveikut can be divided really into three areas. And these areas have to do with action and emotions and intellect. Action, emotions, and intellect. Now, I'm going to just pull up a Sphira chart over here, a chart of the Sphirot. Okay, let's see here. All right, can everyone see that? Yeah, can you see that? You can see the chart? Yes, good. Okay, so the three levels of Deveikut correspond to three different levels or three different divisions of the Sphirot. The lower aspect, the lowest aspect of the Sphirot over here, which is called Nehi or Nehim, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut, that area over there, the last four Sphirot, that corresponds to the idea of action. In human terms, in the human correspondence in the physical body, Netzach is the right leg, Hod is the left leg, Yesod is the procreative organ or the place of procreation, male and female. And Malchut is merely the concept of existence, that's existence in this scenario. So the primary level of Deveikut, the first level of Deveikut, is Netzach Hod Yesod. The next level of Deveikut refers to the Deveikut of emotions, emotional Deveikut, which is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, and Hod. Chesed, kindness; Gvura, severity or awe; love and awe, and compassion. I'm going to put them in these terms: love, awe, and compassion. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet. So those are the primary emotions: love, awe, and compassion, which also have a higher level of Deveikut. And finally, we come to the idea of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at. Chokhmah, wisdom; Bina, understanding; Da'at, knowledge, or Da'at is also known as cleaving. Da'at itself is the concept of cleaving. Adam yada es Chava. Adam knew intimately Chava. That means that there was a complete union between them. But the union was not only a physical union of the sexual organs, it was a union where there was communion. It was a union between them in a sense that made them completely one. Adam Yada es Chava. Okay, so now I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail in terms of what it states in Shir HaShirim. Shir HaShirim is the Song of Songs, and Shir HaShirim is entirely a mashal, it's an analogy for these three types of Deveikut. In other words, all of Shir HaShirim can be divided into various levels of Deveikut. Possibly more than 3 levels of Deveikut, but in general there's 3 levels of Deveikut. 3 levels of this cleaving. So the first type of cleaving, as we mentioned before, is a physical cleaving of action to action. Again, we said that this is primarily the idea of Yesod, or it's these 3 sfirot altogether, but primarily Yesod. Yeah, Yesod is, again, represents the sexual organ. So there is a cleaving of male to female. Again, this is only an analogy. Don't take it as anything more than an analogy. But it's a cleaving of the sexual organs one to another. In other words, that would be the moment of physical intimacy. That's what it would be called, the moment of physical intimacy. But in Kabbalistic terminology, it is called the dibuk, or I'm sorry, not the dibuk, the Deveikut of the Yesodot. The Deveikut of the Yesodot, the cleaving of one Yesod to the other Yesod, which corresponds to action. It's the idea of action. And when I say action, what do we mean by action? Essentially, what we mean by action is the activity of fulfilling the commandments in practice. That is the action which is required. In other words, in order to be able to cleave to the divine, there are certain ways in which this can be done. One of the ways, the first way, and the basis for all of the others essentially, is to cleave to God through proper action. Correct action. The correct action is the action that is laid out in the Torah as the required fulfillment of the physical commandments. This does not include, obviously, the commandments of love and awe and things like that, but the physical commandments like keeping the Sabbath and so on and so forth. And, of course, the negative commandments as well. And it says about this in various places. One of the places that it expresses it very, very clearly is actually in the work called Tanya. Tanya is a work which was written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the disciple of the disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov's chief disciple was the Maggid of Mezrich, and one of his chief disciples was Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who wrote the Tanya. The Tanya is often called the sort of the Bible of Hasidic thought. It's the foundational work of Hasidic thought. So he says like this. He says that the 248 commandments are the way that one cleaves to God in truth. In other words, that aspect of our physical being, physical activity, in physical activity we can cleave to God as well. It's not only something which is relevant in the emotional or intellectual plane or in meditation. One can cleave through action as well. Eating, even such a simple thing as eating, which we need in order to be able to survive, is actually a method. There is an approach to Deveikut through eating. Spoken about at great length in last week's Torah reading in the writings of the Arizal. Rabbi Yitzhak Luria explains in the work called Likutei Torah of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, he explains the kavanot, the intentions that one is supposed to have. In other words, the cleaving that one is supposed to come through the simple act of eating food. Similarly, with all other types of activities, and particularly the activities associated with the mitzvot, all of those activities are in themselves a meditation, and a meditation in cleaving. In other words, when one is doing an activity, that activity in and of itself is a way of cleaving. Okay. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in chapter 4. He says it's impossible to cleave truly without fulfilling, if one doesn't fulfill the 248 commandments. Now, for those who are not obligated in the commandments, people who are not Jewish, so there's the 7 Noahide laws as well. The 7 Noahide laws also require certain actions, activities, and refraining from certain other things. So that's the way we cleave through, the way a person can cleave through the 7 Noahide laws. But in action in general, in activity in general, that kind of cleaving is called yesod to yesod. It's the ability to cleave through action. We go up to a higher level, to the level of the midot, to the level of chesed, gvura, and tiferet. Again, love, awe, and compassion. Those are the chief 3 main emotional qualities, of which everything else is really a derivative. So the cleaving through chesed, gvura, and tiferet is a cleaving of the midot. Now, it says like this in the Talmud. The Talmud says like this. One of the verses says, follow after God and cleave to him. And the Talmud says like this, is it possible for a person to go in the ways of God? Is it possible to cleave to God? Is he not a consuming fire? In other words, figuratively speaking. Just as you can't embrace fire, how can you embrace God? How can you cleave to God? So the Talmud answers, follow, in other words, cleave to his emotions, the emotional qualities. In other words, just as God clothes those who are naked, and so too should you. Just as God visits the sick, so should you. And of course, this is all based on various verses right throughout the Bible that the Talmud quotes. Just as God comforts those who have lost loved ones, those who are in mourning, so should you, and so on and so forth. All the actions that are expressions of love or expressions of awe or expressions of compassion and so on and so forth that we find in the Torah, cleave to those types of emotions. Cleave to those types of emotions, to compassion and to love and to awe. And when you do that, that's also known as Deveikut. That's the Deveikut of our emotions to divine emotions. The cleaving of emotion to emotion. That is called Deveikut through the arms. That's why, because the arms represent Chesed, the right arm, Gvura, the left arm, Tiferet, the torso. Right? So this in Shir Hashirim, in the Song of Songs, is called Smolo Tachat L'Roshi. His left hand is under my head. V'yemino techabkeini, and his right arm embraces me. It's as if two lovers in an embrace. But where is the embrace? The embrace is of the arms. In other words, of the upper body to the upper body, so to speak. In other words, the upper body representing the emotions of the heart, right? Kindness, awe, and compassion. The emotions of the heart. So we're talking here about when heart cleaves to heart. Kain lev ha'adam el ha'adam, the heart of one man to ha'adam, the man. In other words, the divine likeness, so to speak, the divine image, although it's not an image, but ha'adam, Adam is called Adam because he's Adamel Elyon, I am like the one above. In other words, we were made in the mold, so to speak, of the one above. Implanted within us are the same qualities possessed, so to speak, by the divine, by God. And we have to emulate those qualities. We are supposed to emulate the qualities of the divine. Now, there's a whole work actually that talks about this. It's called Tomer Devora, which I think I mentioned on a number of occasions before. Actually, Tomer Devora. Let me just or the palm tree of Devora. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. One second, let me just get this. Now, there are several translations. I would suggest that you take the one that I did. It's available. It's available online. You can probably get it from Amazon or whatever. It's sold by Feldheim. I don't have any copies to sell, so. But it is an authentic translation. There's some notes in the back, references, cross-references, etc., etc. And it's most, I believe it's the most faithful translation to the original, and it's actually readable. So a lot of people actually read it during the month of Elul, or they study that particular book during the month of Elul, which talks about how we cleave to God through trying to be like Him, trying to be godly, trying to be like God. But that is only the second level. That is only the second level of Deveikut. So again, the first level of Deveikut was through action, primarily the action of doing the mitzvot, fulfilling the commandments. The second level of Deveikut, a higher level of Deveikut is cleaving through emotions, right? Displaying the same emotions, so to speak, that God does. Compassion, kindness, love, etc., etc. Okay, now we get to the highest level of Deveikut, which is called the Deveikut of Neshikin, the kiss. As Shir Hashirim starts off with the words, Yeshakeni min shikot pihu, may he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. That idea of kissing is a Deveikut not just of emotions to emotions, but a Deveikut of ruach to ruach, of spirit to spirit. It comes about, the sages explain, it comes about through primarily study of Torah and during prayer. So during Torah study and during prayer is the Deveikut of Ruach to Ruach. Why? Because both study and prayer are done with the breath, right? In other words, one prays out loud, at least in the Jewish tradition, and you study out loud in the Jewish tradition. It's not a mind study, it's a verbal study. Why? Because you have to use the Ruach, the air that comes into you, as part of the as the means of attaching breath to breath, so to speak. And I'll discuss this in a little bit more depth in a minute. But let's first understand what we're talking about over here. So again, there is the book called the Tanya in chapter 33. He explains as follows. He says, this should be the true joy of the soul, when a person is able to plunge his thought into the depths of ideas, and he can draw in his imagination, or conceive in his imagination, the oneness of God, how he fills all worlds, even this physical world down here, and transcends all worlds at the same time, so that there is nothing other than him. Everything else is regarded as if it didn't even exist. And all of creation is completely nullified in his existence, and so on and so forth. And that's called the highest level of Deveikut. You can have a look in Tanya in chapter 33, and he explains again in chapter 47. In chapter 47, he explains how it is called Ruach Aiti Ruach Va'amshich Ruach, that spirit calls forth spirit and draws it down. In other words, when we use our spirit, meaning our intellectual prowess, but as we speak it out through, we verbalize intellectual concepts through study and during prayer, then it draws down Ruach. It draws down the spirituality from above. It draws down that same idea from above. In other words, ruchaniyut, spirituality. Now, just let me stop sharing for a moment over here, because I want to get to just give me a second, folks. Okay. So there is a meditation from the Baal Shem Tov called the meditation on the breath. This is from the Baal Shem Tov. Now, the word breath in Hebrew could be called ruach. Ruach can mean spirit, it can mean breath, it can mean air. It can mean wind. The word breath can also be, is also called neshima. Neshima, from the very close to the word neshama. Neshama, soul, neshima, breath. So Baal Shem Tov has a meditation on the breath. And this is actually on my website, and I'm reading from there. It's under the Soul Hangouts blog, which I don't do much very often on that, but nevertheless. So he says like this. He says, as one breathes, he should cleave, again, Deveikut, to the supernal breath that clings to him too, and enters him constantly. On the verse, every soul utters God's praises, which is in Psalms 150, our sages comment, with every breath that a person breathes, he cleaves to God, or he can. So how do you do this? What's the actual practical meditation? As you exhale, the breath goes out, And as your breath goes out, it returns to its source above. And then another breath is breathed into you from above. So in other words, it's not you doing the breathing, it's the breath coming into you, it's being breathed into you. As it says with Adam, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. God breathed into the nostrils of Adam the breath of life. So that didn't only happen once, that happens all the time. At least we don't feel it that way. We for sure don't, and we feel that it's us breathing, us doing the breathing. But this is the meditation, is to experience the breathing as we breathe in and out, as if the breath coming into us is being breathed in from above, and the breath as it goes out is returning up above. Now, if one meditates on this for even just a few minutes, with this idea in mind that the breath is being breathed into you by God, and then it returns to its original source, it returns to God, you will find that this brings about a very, very powerful feeling of Deveikut. It's the highest level of Deveikut, and does require the other two levels as well, but not necessarily. It's not necessarily so that one has to perfect the lowest level before going to the high. In other words, the level of action before going to the level of emotion, and then the level of emotion before going to the level of ruach that we're talking about here. Yes, it's the healing breath of God, right. Breath can also mean spirit. It does, yes. Ruach means spirit as well. So, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim, that's a living soul. In other words, that's a spirit that was breathed into us when we first became alive. And if you ever have watched a birth, women would know this, who've had babies would know this much better than men. You see that the child is in the womb and doesn't breathe anything. All of a sudden it comes out and how does that happen? How does it start to breathe? It's just a wondrous thing. It's a fantastic, unbelievable, miraculous event when that happens. But it's that the breath is being breathed into the child. That is really what happens. And we can start to feel that. And if one does this meditation on a regular basis and for an extended period of time, you start to really feel the effects of such a thing. Again, as you exhale and the breath goes out, returns to its source above, and then another breath is breathed into you from above. If a person contemplates the fact that he or she is not breathing at all, rather the Holy One, blessed be He, is breathing in and out of him or her, it will surely be easy for one to attach that part, to attach the part of God within them, in other words, their soul, to its root. So that comes from Baal Shem Tov al HaTorah, Baal Shem Tov on the Torah, his commentary on the Torah, which he didn't write, it's just collected from his teachings. He wrote very little, it was from his oral teachings, so it comes from his students. In the parasha called Noach, and in the section called Amud HaTfilah 27, that's where it is, Amud HaTfilah. But you can find it all on my blog, Meditation on the Breath from the Baal Shem Tov. It's in the blog at the end of KabbalahDecoded.com. Again, KabbalahDecoded.com. Go to the Soul Hangouts blog, which is very sparsely populated. I don't put much effort into it, lacking time. But in any event, that's where it is. You can see it written there. So that is also clearly an idea in Deveikut. That's the highest level of Deveikut, cleaving of spirit to spirit, cleaving the breath to the breath. Now, interestingly enough, there is the sages talk about the passing of Aaron and the passing of Moses, and Miriam, actually, their sister. When Miriam and Moses and Aaron passed away, all of them died by what is called mitas neshikin, right? Mitas neshikin means the kiss of death, but not in a negative sense. They died as if by a kiss. Mostly when the soul leaves the body and a person passes on, when a person dies, so it's kind of a wrenching of the soul from the body. Whereas with great saintly people like Moses, Miriam, Aaron, the soul is not wrenched from the body. Rashi, the classic commentator, says like taking a hair out of milk. There's no pain involved. It's just like smoothly comes out. It's very easy. It doesn't, and that's called misas neshikin. It's the kiss of death. There are many people that pray And when they die, they'll die by the kiss of death. It says about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that he died with a kiss. Yeah, mitas nashikin, because again, this is this level of Deveikut is called the Deveikut of kissing. So the soul is in such a state of Deveikut, in such a state of cleaving, that it's so to speak a prolonged kiss from the one above, from God, and the soul just remains cleaving, and the body sort of dies. That's called mitzas nashikin. Okay, now I will just tell